First, we will take a look at a snapshot of the total population of the world with respect to which continents people live on. In 2017, over 4.4 billion people live in Asia, which accounts for almost 60% of the world's population. 1.2 billion people live in Africa, which accounts for 16% of the world's population. Almost 1 billion people live in North and South America combined, which means only 13.5% of the world's population lives on those continents. Close to 750 million people live in Europe, accounting for just over 10% of the world's population, and the tiny segment in the corner that is hard to see is Oceania, which is Australia and its surrounding neighbors. 38 million people live there, which is half of 1% of the entire world population. A quick glance at the birth and death rates in 2017 of each area of the world will tell us which continents are currently growing in population and which ones are shrinking. Most continents have birth rates higher than their death rates, which means their populations are increasing, except for Europe. Africa has the highest birth rate of 32 births per 1,000 people, but also has one of the highest death rates of 11 deaths per 1,000 people. The Americas have a birth rate of almost 17 and a death rate of 7.7. Asia has a birth rate of almost 20 and a death rate of 7.3, which is slightly lower than the Americas, so its population looks like it's increasing slightly faster than the Americas. Europe's birth rate is only 10.42 births per 1,000 people, half the rate of the Americas, and its death rate is 11, which is the same as Africa's. From this, we can see that the natural population in Europe will shrink over time unless people immigrate to the area. Oceania's birth and death rates are almost the same as Asia's, at 19.5 and almost 7, respectively. The rates of death in the world are interesting to examine, but I wanted to know, what are the causes of death around the world? Are they similar or different depending on where you live or what culture you are from? So I found a public data set showing causes of death in the world. As you can see, there are many ways to die on planet Earth in 2017. The list of causes is very long. Some have to do with malnutrition, others with cleanliness of your surroundings or pollution, but there are some sections on these wheels that are very large, and they have to do with our life choices. High blood sugar was the cause of death for over 18% of people in North America in 2017. Relatedly, obesity was the cause for 16%. High blood pressure was the cause of 18%, and a history of smoking is still caused almost 15% of the deaths. These sections are very large on almost all the wheels, except for Africa. Just looking at the causes of death on the continent of Africa, we can see that it is a very different place. Child wasting still accounts for 8% of deaths, but high blood pressure is also a problem, as other places, but a history of smoking only accounts for 4% of deaths, and obesity only 5%. High blood sugar does seem to be a problem in Africa. Death from diseases related to unsafe sex accounts for almost the same amount of deaths, as does air pollution. Unsafe water sources also seem to be an issue. But how have the causes of death on planet Earth changed over time? Let's add in a few other snapshot years for comparison. We are currently looking at 2017, but what does it look like when we add 2007 and 1997? Child wasting was a much larger issue in 1997 in Africa at 13.5%. Air pollution was pretty big, unsafe sex is pretty big, unsafe water, poor sanitation, and lack of hand-washing facilities are big factors in Africa in 1997. Many issues still plague Africa in 2007. Deaths from diseases related to unsafe sex rose over 14.5%. Children dying of wasting rose to 10%, but in 2017 it was back down to 8%. We can see again that the causes of death in Africa are more varied than other continents, and one could make a presentation on Africa alone. But I'm more concerned about the large areas on the other wheels, so let's hide Africa for a moment and examine the other countries. In 1997, high blood pressure was a major cause of death in Asia. Obesity was not a big problem, only 3%. High blood sugar only accounted for 6% of deaths, but in 2007, it grew to over 9%. Air pollution was a known problem in Asia, but many people also die of smoking and high blood pressure. But we should be most concerned about the rise of deaths from high blood sugar and obesity. Looking at Europe, a history of smoking was a major cause of death in 1997. High blood pressure was the biggest, though. Obesity was only the cause of 10% of deaths, and high blood sugar was only the cause of 12% in 1997. For Europe, alcohol-related deaths are a relatively big problem compared to other places in the world. In 2007, obesity-related deaths had risen to 11.5%, and high blood sugar deaths were approaching 13%. High blood pressure was still the biggest cause of death, and second was a history of smoking. However, by 2017, high blood sugar-related deaths had risen to over 14.5% of all deaths in Europe, and obesity had risen to over 12%. High blood pressure has been holding as the most frequent cause at 24%, and smoking continues to be number 2. Moving over to North America, high blood sugar deaths are high at approaching 13%. Obesity deaths account for almost 12.5%, but high blood pressure and smoking-related deaths are the biggest causes at around 20% each in 1997. 10 years later, death caused by high blood sugar has risen to over 16% of all deaths. Obesity is causing 14.5% of deaths. The percentage of deaths from high blood pressure have decreased. So have the percentages of deaths from smoking. This brings us to 2017, where the percentage of people dying in North America from high blood sugar has overtaken the percentage of people dying from high blood pressure, and the percentage of deaths related to obesity has overtaken those related to smoking. The continents of Oceania and South America seem to be on a similar trajectory. So it seems that for most of the world, there are 4 major causes of death: obesity, smoking, high blood sugar, and high blood pressure. Let's look at the rates of these causes in 2017 per 1,000 people. But the best way to take a look is to see a trend line of these causes over time. The red line is the rate of obesity-related deaths per 1,000 people from 1995 to 2017. In North America, Oceania, and South America, these lines go sharply up during those 22 years. We can see that almost 1 in 1,000 people died of obesity-related issues in 2017 in North America. The rate is even higher in Oceania, and South America is getting higher as well. One of the most interesting things about these rates is seeing how obesity has overtaken smoking as the cause of death in many places. In North America, this change happened in the late 1990s, and in Oceania in the mid-1990s. In South America, it didn't occur until 2009. Obesity has still not overtaken smoking as a cause of death in Asia, but you can see the lines coming together. Obesity deaths overtook smoking deaths in Africa around 2007, but in Europe, the 2 lines are still far apart. In North America, as well as the rest of the world, high blood pressure has been a major cause of death for decades. However, high blood sugar has risen as a cause. In Oceania, the rates of deaths caused by high blood sugar overtook high blood pressure in the late 1990s. But in South America, the rates of deaths to high blood pressure remains higher, but both are on an upward trend. We know that obesity and high blood sugar issues are linked to personal sugar intake. This pie chart shows the revenue of the Coca-Cola Company. North Americans drink a lot of Coca-Cola. In fact, the majority of Coca-Cola's revenues come from North America. But we saw on the last graph that obesity and blood sugar issues are not just a North American issue. So I guess we can't really blame it all on Coca-Cola. Just how much sugar do people consume every day on each continent? This bar graph shows daily sugar intake in grams for people on each continent. Wow, North Americans on average eat or drink over 100 grams of sugar every day? Oceania is up there too. This does not look good. It's not on this graph, but the World Health Organization recommends that people eat no more than 20 grams of sugar per day. On average, there is not one continent meeting that goal. Asia and Africa are the lowest, though. What should we do about this? This map shows countries that have imposed extra taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages in an attempt to discourage their consumption. The yellow countries have this extra tax. The green countries do not. The gray countries are lacking data. Most of South America has put this tax in place, but we can see that except for a few countries, most of Asia has not. Yet sugar consumption in Asia is very low. Perhaps this is just a cultural difference? Would a tax on food items containing added sugar help curb this disturbing trend of obesity and high blood sugar-related deaths? Perhaps that could be the subject of another presentation.